Hey guys, how's it going? KRIPP'S here. Diablo 4 Season 4 is happening. And today I want to give you guys another build guide for a build that I am considering playing, and it is once again the Firewall Sorc. Now, Firewall Sorc has been honestly the most enjoyable type of build to play in the game, with the core functionality that you stack Lucky Hit, your firewalls proc meteors, your meteors proc firewalls, and with the more targets they are, the more it chain reacts. It's a build that started to gain quite a lot of popularity in Season 3 when we got the Starfall Coronet, which basically puts a cooldown on your meteor, but you get a whole bunch of meteors instead of just one. And that is really good for keeping up and effectively going infinite. If you had absolutely perfect gear, and generally you'd be getting this from stacking enormous amount of Lucky Hit, you would kind of hit infinite damage where like the firewall that you'd cast would keep becoming a meteor, then a firewall that just forever and ever, around like 3 or 4 targets. Now, single target, this build will always be lacking at least a little bit, but the area of effect damage effectively could hit infinite, and that is super cool in my mind. So, I have updated the build for Season 4. You guys can check out the build in the description below. It is on Mobalytics, along with all the other KRIPP builds, if you guys are interested in checking those out. So, it's a build that I think is really worth attempting in Season 4, and I haven't seen literally anyone talk about it. So, in Season 4, we have this new mechanic, okay? They basically redesigned gear. So what do they do to redesign gear? There's 2 major mechanics. The first one is tempering, where you add a few extra stats. So you add stat number 4 and 5 to the piece of gear. And the other one is Masterworking, which is like pretty endgame, really high-level stuff, but the idea is that you can up the stats on your gear. More importantly, you can kind of like crit a stat up and basically multiply its value. So builds that scale off of one specific stat are now able to get like literally twice as much. So yeah, this is basically the build. If I had to pick a build that is way, way, way better if I can double up on one stat compared to Season 3, it would literally be this one. So I'm actually surprised it hasn't kind of garnered more attention. So you can be a hipster and show your friends all the cool firewall stuff if you like. But yes, the idea is that now you can super stack Lucky Hit chance, making it so instead of doing infinity damage when you have 3 targets, maybe you can get it down to like 1 or 2 targets, which is pretty insane, actually. So I thought that was pretty cool. Now, the build uses a whole bunch of unique items, and this is kind of the other part that's actually pretty good. So for unique items, you do not have the tempering mechanic. You cannot add stats to a unique, but you do have the Masterworking mechanic. So you can super stack one stat on a unique item. Now, they also had the stat redesign in Season 4, so a lot of the stats that are actually pretty good were kind of removed or simplified down. Now, unique items were largely not changed. For example, you can see the Soul Brand has Lucky Hit while you have a barrier. This is not a stat that you can get on a chest piece. I'm not even sure it's a stat you can get on anything anymore. The damage reduction from close enemies, that's not a stat that you can get on anything anymore. So because the build uses Soul Brand, yes, we don't take advantage of the tempering mechanic when we use a unique in that slot. We do get the Masterworking. So the idea is that now we can Masterwork the Lucky Hit, or we can Masterwork the damage reduction from close. And like every single damage reduction modifier was removed. So some of these uniques are deceptively good compared to previous seasons. Like they nerfed Tybalt's Will, which is like, oh, maybe we shouldn't use Tybalt's Will because they just nerfed it. Well, if you can Masterwork damage reduction from close enemies, it's like absolutely insane. It might be like a slightly worse item compared to the version that we had in Season 3, but when compared to alternatives in the gear slots, specifically in the defensive gear slots, it actually received a massive upgrade. Now, one of the really major mechanics on the PTR that people were kind of blown away with is there's these new tempering modifiers called weapon modifiers. So there's offensive ones, which you can get on your weapon, your offhand, your rings, your amulet, your gloves, all that. But there's a specific one for weapons, like weapons only. And these ones are basically lucky hit chance to proc a direct damage. Now, they were so obscene in terms of their power level that we expect them to be nerfed. But again, this build is going to have the highest lucky hit of possibly any build in Diablo 4. So you can imagine, yeah, they might nerf it a little bit, but that is an enormous buff to the build. We're basically going to get additional X-Fall-like procs, and the X-Fall ring basically modernized the build to what it is. The Starfall Coronet put it over the top, and in Season 4, we are literally doubling the lucky hit. So that is pretty sweet. If you want to see everything burn down in flames, this is the build for you. In terms of the details, I have decided to use basically the same kind of stuff as last season, but we do have no seasonal mechanic that's providing utility. I think in every single season up until this one, we had some way that you could get vulnerable from the seasonal mechanic, like the Seneschal Pet or the vampire powers, that kind of stuff. Now, well, you only get it from Ice Blades. So single target vulnerable, you're going to have really good uptime, but if you want AoE vulnerable, and you probably want AoE vulnerable, you're going to want to use the aspect of a Cursed Touch, which gives you a lucky hit vulnerable chance. But with your lucky hit being so absurdly high, that's not really going to be a problem. The character gear-wise is very similar to before, uses the same uniques as a matter of fact. The gear in the other slots, you really want to prioritize lucky hit, but things like int and a few of the other stats are also far more abundant than before, which is also really cool. In terms of the skill tree, there are not a lot of changes, but we do have to actually spec into the defensive skills because from the PTR at least, it doesn't appear to be that the plus to a skill group has remained. So there's no plus to defensive skills on an amulet that was the most important stat before. Well, it doesn't seem like that is a thing anymore. And you might be like, well, doesn't that make Sorc bad? Well, maybe, but then, you can masterwork the cooldown reduction on your gear and actually have lower cooldowns than before. So not really. It kind of just depends on how you decide to build a character or, basically how the masterworking dice decides to roll. Overall, I've kept the paragons very similar. I've kept the skill tree very similar. It's really the gear changes that changes it so substantially. And that is the main focus of Season 4. So I expect this to be a pretty interesting journey. Normally, a lot of people are going to be target farming rares and stuff, but you're going to be target farming uniques. And you're going to have some of the coolest uniques in the game if you choose to play this build. And if you do, make sure to bookmark the link if you guys want to check it out on Mobalytics or this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it.